Hey everybody, what's up? How's it going? Sage here with Jones. Welcome back to Hive Live, y'all. Broadcasting from Portland, Maine. Really happy to be here. This will be my last interview in Portland for a while. And I'm ending it in a good way. It's a good culmination. We've talked to some amazing people over the last couple of days, and ending with one of my favorite people here in Portland, Maine. One of my favorite practitioners and colleagues and people of inspiration, Jones. So without further ado, let's say hi. Thanks for being on.
Hi, that Thanks for that sweet introduction.
You're welcome, absolutely. We've known each other for a while, and we've shared some practice space.
Yeah, it was great.
Shared community, and we're going to talk today a little bit about Jones's practice and her teaching, particularly around embodied writing.
Yeah.
And like what that even is and why it could be helpful, especially at this time on the planet.
Great.
Yeah. So before we get into that, though, why don't you give us a little snapshot of who you are?
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Sage.
Yeah, Jones.
And before I even do that, since I'm the last one before a long time, I think if I can't see people who are watching, but just huge heart thank you to you. This is such good medicine. And, this is a time, it doesn't surprise me that you have epic cosmic timing, but when you asked me to do this, I wasn't like, oh, there's going to be an inauguration and then our whole social nervous system is going to spin out. But, I think for a lot of us, we're on social media feeds and it's sort of an onslaught.
Yes, it is an onslaught.
It's like, here's a terrible story and here's a thing. And in the midst of that, to see these just phenomenal practitioners and to see these people who are so committed to justice, and committed to health, and they're committed to each other, and you have really made that happen in this incredibly powerful way. So, before we start, I just feel like I want to just high praise to you for creating community wherever you go, and now sort of globally. So.
Thank you so much, Jones. Well, thank you, and thanks for acknowledging, this has been so exciting to create a different type of narrative than the one that we are being onslaught with, and it's a gift to me, and I've just heard from so many people how helpful it is to listen to 5 minutes of this or 5 minutes of that, not even listen to the whole thing, but just that it's it's a real conversation that brings us back to our bodies, our spirits, and each other, and what's possible when we stay connected, you know?
So true. And I think, one of the big questions we're being asked right now is how we get active and also how we resource ourselves.
Yeah.
And so to see these practitioners, to just know that there's this constellation of really dedicated folks out there, it's like, as a practitioner and as a person, it's there's a support network that we can feel into, and we need that.
Yeah, I love that you call it a constellation, and I just want to add to that is so much about what the Hive and the Hive directory is about, we have so many people out there doing this good work, and what I'm doing right now is sort of picking a handful of people and saying, let's visibilize the good work you're doing and what's possible with that work.
Yeah.
But the Hive network is absolutely to visibilize what's going on, because when everybody gets to meet you and gets to meet all the people, it's like, oh, okay, I'm not alone, and here's some ideas, and the directory is really to lift up the good work that's already going on and to help visibilize and amplify and support the constellations that are already there.
Yeah.
And I'm really, my next phase after this particular intensive with Hive Live winds down. Now I'm going to keep doing Hive Live, but it's not going to be as often. But my next intention will be to, is to bring the directory forward and to figure out how to support local networks and constellations of practitioners to potentially use it as a tool, and communities to use it as a tool. So
it's so great.
Oh,
it's so great.
Thanks, Jones.
And it's a really nice thread to work that we both do, especially, and I'm sure we'll come back around to this, but in biodynamic cranio, which is something we both practice. I guess we're always learning to practice, right? But we resonate with the health.
Yes.
We amplify what is well. Yeah. And as you have said to me, there is so much that is well.
Yeah.
even just sitting here.
Yeah.
So that's something that goes through if I see an individual client, if I run a class, if I'm working with adults, if I'm working with young people. It's like, how do we resonate with the health and amplify that so this is a space where people can really show up fully and support it.
Right, and that's sort of contrary to so many approaches that are like the folks focus on the problem first or the symptom.
Right.
That our lens as biodynamic cranial practitioners is like to go right toward the health, to presence with it, and to, like you said, to amplify. And it's like this obvious thing when you learn it, but you're like, oh my God, I so focus on the problem, but like what's working?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is so much working. If you're alive, there's so much more health than there is anything else. That's
right. Yeah. We are above ground and vertical.
Exactly, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot to work with. So, okay, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Give us a little snapshot of who you are before we jump into the work piece.
Okay. You know, I was thinking, this seems like such a straightforward question. Right?
Yeah, well, no, nobody thinks it's straightforward.
Right.
A deer in headlights when I ask it.
Oh, who am I? Right, I'm a Scorpio. No, I mean, I'm a mom, I run a practice, I live outside of Portland. I have a family, I have a lot of people that I care about, locally, globally. I feel that really deeply right now, especially. But I feel like to get the sense of the practice, it is actually worth saying how I came up a little bit, because so I grew up in and around Boston, and my mom is Swedish. She came over in the mid-'70s, and so I grew up partly with a foot in Boston and partly with a foot in Sweden.
Oh, cool.
And, you know, for anybody who has a parent whose first language is not English and grows up here, your ears get or at least for me, I pay a lot of attention to language and how it works and how we present things, and never feeling totally American, you know, because there's a really different way of being. And language in particular is always a really juicy spot for me. You know, like sitting around the table with all my uncles and my relatives in Sweden, part of what you do is you sing and you drink and you tell stories, and you don't do it in English, right? And that, from the beginning, was so exciting to me, because it was well, first of all, all the dirty stories I wasn't supposed to understand were told in Swedish, which is the greatest motivation for learning a language.
That's
when they
awesome.
Discovered that I was following it all, they were like, oh no. But also, you know, language, in Swedish, there is one word for yeah, please, I would like some, but not if it's too much to ask and not if it takes too much away from you.
Oh, wow.
You know?
Yeah.
Yana is okay, sort of, but there's no word for please, right? So I come at language and speaking with this real appreciation for, and I speak Spanish too, for how it is we make sense of ourselves. What words do we choose? How do we express the fullness of ourselves? And writing is something that I've always done. It's how I make sense of myself to myself. You know, I think a lot of us do that. We keep a little. I was looking through one I had from when I was 10 the other night. It was
whoa.
It goes way back.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did it say? What's one thing it said?
Oh my gosh.
If you can think of anything.
I was pissy. I was pissy. I was angry. I think I yelled at my sister. Then I was really excited. I had sleepover. I mean, you know, it's wherever you are, it's whatever's big.
Yeah, right. That, of course, absolutely. And at 10 years old, you were documenting that.
Yeah. And I think that documentation piece is important.
Yes.
At least for me. So that's part of the background, is that love of language. Then I'm a teacher, and so I was a classroom teacher for a couple of years in Costa Rica, actually, in a bilingual classroom. And I love teaching. My mom is a teacher. My grandmother, who's 98, was a teacher.
She's 98 now?
She's 98 now.
That's
She's turning 99 in August.
What's her name?
Britta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Britta.
Yeah. So being in a classroom is a really magical space for me. And I get really fed by seeing a group find its voice and work together and kind of discover itself. That's really exciting for me. So I was a teacher, and I had all these students who were amazing storytellers. But what I found was they didn't necessarily want to write. But if you gave them a microphone, they could tell you a story. And they could interview people. And then they did want to write. So I went from being a classroom teacher, and then I went to the SALT Institute here in Portland, and I studied documentary writing and radio. And eventually I became the director of this National Youth Radio Network for PRX, the Public Radio Exchange. They're wonderful people, and it was this amazing opportunity to work with young people around the country to help them tell radio stories, to get those stories on the air.
That's so exciting.
It was great.
So the intersection of so many things all at once.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amplification of voice. It's owning your own story. It's how you authentically express your experience. It's how you connect with somebody else. You know, it's how you follow up. What does it mean to ask a good question? What does it mean to listen with your whole self? You know, kids, third graders recognize when you're not listening to somebody. You know, we would do this role play. Like, how do you show with your whole body that you're here?
Wow.
And the other thing about, as a teacher, teaching radio, is like, it's such good training for writing, because you know, one of the things, so that in a lot of different ways, but like when you write for the radio, it's not like writing for school, because it's got to be like how you speak,
right?
You know, it's got to be you.
Yeah. Right, because it's it's audio. It's so different.
Yeah.
The listeners, and there's a listener, first of all.
There's a listener.
Yeah.
And you can tell so much about somebody from their voice.
Yeah.
You know, but it's not about your image.
Right.
Which for the teenagers I worked with, that was huge, to be able to represent yourself free from what people see.
Right.
That's potent, right?
It's super potent. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I loved that. I did that for nearly a decade. But meantime, another one of these ways I came to be who I am is that I got really sick.
Yeah.
I got really sick. And I have an autoimmune disease called ulcerative colitis. And I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And, you know, like, I think for those of us, you know, a lot of us have histories with being sick, and that's part of what brings us to a larger understanding of health and what it means to occupy our bodies. For me, one of the things that it led me to was like, I just wanted to understand what the hell was happening. So I started like dipping a toe into, like, I took anatomy and physiology for fun, and I loved it. I totally loved it. You know, I'm a nerd, so like, give me your anatomy book. Like, let's go through it. You know. Yeah. I studied alternative practices around movement, around embodiment, around integration. I went to massage school. I studied neuromuscular therapy. And eventually I ended up leaving public radio to start my practice root therapy. And then, I mean, I guess if we want to get to embodied writing and how I got there. Yeah. So I was cruising along.
Well, I do want to say, like, how was your healing process through all that? Because, I mean, we kind of get a little bit of a sense, but the one question I often ask is, like, give us a story about what led you to this work. And it sounds like it was so personal in the sense of understanding what was happening within your own body and getting sick. And then did that, just as you did anatomy and physiology and then massage school and this training and that training, like, was that all obviously learning, but it was also like healing too, right, along the way? And yeah, a lot of times it was healing, and sometimes it was really not. You know, so, and I should back up and say that learning was really healing for me. But you know, in the middle of this, I'm in and out of hospitals. I'm seeing a ton of doctors. Right. I'm having this experience of being super pathologized. I still feel, you know, this is like 10 years ago. It's still, I can feel that, like, poof. What is the, like, what do you mean?
Well, like, super sadness about that, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not with regret. It's just like, oh, I look at my younger self and I'm like, sorry. And, but that's also part of what gives me so much compassion for somebody who comes and sits in this chair in my office. Is like, when you are at the bottom of the ravine, that is a real place.
Yes, it is.
And there's no rushing there. There's no glossing over that. It's kind of like grief. Like, you just have to sit with the truth of that. So I had the experience of both, you know, and none of this is linear. I'm like condensing
Yeah,
a long
of course.
time. So
yeah.
it wasn't like,
But it's so rich.
yeah.
In its non-linear nature, actually.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of us who go deep with this work, sometimes it'll come back, like, it'll feel very circular, like, this again? Like, didn't I figure this out? But it's deeper this time.
And I think the reason why I want just this pause feels really good in sort of dipping back in and moving forward is that, like, you know, with most healing practitioners I know, like, the expression of holding space for people in healing is such a deep, complex journey of your own experience. And there is so much, like, you know, usually it's kind of like these days you say, oh, take a class in this or embodied this or embodied that, and or like in class in whatever, and there's still just like a there can be this two-dimensional thing without so many people bringing it into the body or just to the lived frame of reference of like bringing yourself in to teach something or bringing yourself into a practice. And I'm really enjoying like listening to people's non-linear journey and how you came to teach embodied writing and have root therapy, because I think there's, first of all, people can trust it more because you've traveled this, you know, your own road with it. You know, when you say when you're at the bottom of the ravine, you have to just sit with it. Like when you sit across from somebody, they know, they can feel that you've sat with that, you know, so they'll let you sit with that maybe a little bit more. And so it's just like I just want to like pause and just do a shout out to everybody out there who is practicing anything that you're bringing forth in your work right now, and you're bringing forth with your heart and your experience and your vulnerability. You know, like all the lessons and the healings that we've had, like they're all part of the evolution of the medicine, you know? And I don't know, that just feels important to say today for some reason. I have no idea why.
I'm really glad that you say that, because I think, and this is especially for those newer practitioners out there, I think sometimes you can look at other practitioners and be like, oh, you know, they've got it all figured out.
Right.
And it is, I don't think any of us, or certainly not for me, you know, it's that make the road by walking piece. You know, I sort of feel like for me it was like somebody just had a flashlight and you can just see the next thing.
Oh my God.
You know,
so
like you're like,
true. That's
okay,
such a good way to put it.
Now I got here. What do I do now? And then it's like, okay, this thing illuminates.
Yeah.
And it's only in hindsight that path is ever clear.
Absolutely.
But it's not like the lights are all on and the road is straight and we're just going down the road. It's like, you know, oh, there's this particular roadblock and there's this, you know, appreciation I have for what I thought I wanted to do and I don't. Or, you know, this came up or this family need or, you know, so just to say, like, I think we're all figuring this out as we go along, and to not, I really appreciate that you slow it down there, to not imagine there's this veneer of, and I think people do that when they sit down with practitioners. We want to feel like, and we're all doing, we're doing our work, but the path,
hopefully.
Maybe not all, but the path is opaque in a lot of ways. And so it's like, what's the next juicy spot, and that helps guide the movement. And
the next juicy spot is it.
Yeah.
And that's all it needs to be. But those thoughts of like, I should have it all, X, Y, Z.
Totally.
I just thank you that was just such a beautiful metaphor.
Yeah. It's not in the brochure.
Right? First of all, there isn't a brochure. but that brochure of like the narrative of like, you have to have it all together. That's it's sort of the collective brochure of like, you know, A plus B equals C. And it's like, it doesn't work like that in life, but especially as a healing arts practitioner.
No. And I mean, we know this, our bodies aren't linear. There's nothing liney about us. Right?
True story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the spine, especially the spine.
Yeah.
Some tons of tiny pieces. So, you know, there's, I think, and that's actually a nice segue too.
Great.
So then I left public radio and I started a massage practice. And it got real busy real fast. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And then, talk about a roadblock, I developed this crazy issue with my hands that came out of nowhere, and I couldn't practice. And I was like, you know, it was like, really?
And it was a crazy physical issue. It wasn't like just like a
No, it was like my my hands had a physical issue that was like, I can't put hands on bodies right now, literally.
Yeah.
I just, And it was, I think this is important in our evolutionist practitioners. Sometimes you're like, oh, I figured it out, and then you walk right into the glass door. You're like, oh no, but so and I'm very lucky that I have a partner who supported me, and so I had some time to be like, so if I can't do massage, what is it? And I really want to name the privilege of that position, because that is big, to be able to be like, okay, somebody's got my back, and I can take a month or so to be like, where does the ballast fall actually in a
Thanks for naming that.
Way. Yeah,
it's critical.
It is critical.
Most of the people who I went to school with had partners, were married, and this was like a side thing, and so it is really different when you don't have that sort of financial, emotional sort of container. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have enough wiggle room. You don't have as much wiggle room. To pause.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was incredibly lucky that I had that, and started to listen for what is the sort of Venn diagram of things that I really love? Because I didn't feel like massage was great, but it didn't feel like I could bring all of myself, And this is a question. One of the questions that I wrestled with as in trying to find what the path was like. Is it energy or is it structure? Is it space or is it matter? And yes is the answer for me, right? So in massage, it was like, well, is it body work or is it radio? Is it totally embodied or is it totally disembodied? And my body cannot abide holding the illusion that we're just one thing. So, I was like, I know that there's something here around writing, but it's also the body. And it's also about teaching, and it's also about transformation. And that's so then I really changed my practice. So then I brought in more zero balancing to the sessions, which is a great modality that involves traction on foundational joints, that is joints that we can't move consciously.
Oh, cool.
So when you traction, if I, it's a little hard to do sitting down, but when you traction these older joints, it's like you get different choice in the present. It's like a lot of those, like the vertebral costal joints, it's like we laid down those movement patterns a long time ago. I had a teacher who said we are perfectly adapted to a situation that we left 30 or 50 or 70 years ago. So a lot of our work is coming into the present. So zero balancing was a great modality.
That's great. Can I just go back to one thing? Is that okay? So I just want to say, I think that tool around the Venn diagram and the visual around that is a really great tool just for anybody who's like, so then what? Or so now what? Like, I just want to say, maybe it's obvious to you all, I'm not sure, but I just think it's really cool. I just want to mention it. Is like, you sort of said, so what are the things? Like, it's radio, it's teaching, it's transformation, it's embodiment. And literally you sort of do the Venn diagram and you sort of say, you sort of look at the overlaps of those. And even if you're like, I remember sitting with you, at coffee, and you were like, I have no idea. But part of the process was you sit with the overlap in the uncertainty and of the mystery, and with, throw in a little bit of faith, which is so, not so easy to imagine that there's a way.
Right.
And it's like sometimes it's like sitting with that overlap of the things that are so most in your heart, that if you sit with it long enough, it will likely open into something we couldn't imagine.
Right.
So I just want to name that.
Thank you for backing up.
Because I just like it as a tool for people.
Yeah. No, I think it's useful, and I think a lot of us too. It's that we're not binary. So a lot of times,
Amen.
Right? So a lot of times it'll feel like choices are limited.
Right.
And I think sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes if you are willing to sit in this really deeply uncomfortable space, and I was there for a couple of years.
For a couple of years, you guys.
Yeah, years.
That's
years.
that's such a potent piece of history.
Yeah. Being like, what is the thing? And that idea of the third choice. Or the fifth, or the ninth, or the infinity choice. That binary spectrum is it's much narrower than we are.
Yes.
So the opportunity of having my hands completely crap the bed for a while was that I had to really amplify this uncomfortable space and name a little bit more, what is the work that, is the juicy spot. We were talking about the flashlight.
Right. I'm sorry, I'm coming in again, but I also want to say, like, how relevant that is to our times. Like, as structures keep failing and falling apart, and the two-party political system, and, like, it's just, like, being able to tolerate the discomfort of as much as we can, as so much is starting to shake in a way that we have been training for our whole life and yet are not ready for it on some level. Yeah. But nobody's ever ready for it.
Right.
You know, this sort of rumbling of the breakdown.
Yes.
And of the breaking apart.
Right, and that's a really nice one, because we often don't go there willingly.
No, who wants to go there? It's terrible.
It's so uncomfortable.
It's terrible.
Yeah, so, you know, I think that's a really nice thing to underline, is that, like, when those structures fall apart, it is the sort of it's the necessary creation of something else. Mm-hmm. But like getting sick, we don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
And maybe there's probably a smoother way to do this that I didn't find. But in my experience, it was that, like, sitting with the not comfort a lot.
Oh, great. We have time. I thought it was quarter up. It's just we still got, like, a solid, like, half an hour. Perfect. Good. Okay, good. So where do you want to go next?
Keep me on. So the practice, so there was some zero balancing, biodynamic craniosacral, which is a really potent practice that you sort of started talking about this, but you resonating on the health. Amplifying what's well, you know, helping that nervous system drop into the parasympathetic so we can discharge, really arrive here in the present. Because this here is where we heal, right? It's not back there, it's not forward there. So that's a great tool that I'm really enjoying dipping into. And then,
you're really good at it.
Thanks, buddy.
Sure.
I really love it. You know, I mean, this is also probably a nice thing when you find these things that work for you. It hopefully feels good. So it wasn't like massage where I was like, oh, my shoulder's going out. You know, it was like,
right, the effort.
Yeah, this feeds me back. And you know, just work doesn't always feel good.
Of course.
It's not dreamy, but it is nourishing, and I do feel that way about biodynamic. And then neuromuscular. So I still get to be the anatomy nerd. People can walk in and say they have a hurt shoulder, and I can be like, yes, let's go into the scalenes, right? But then there was this other piece, which was writing. It was like, what happens outside of the treatment room? And that's when I stumbled on this idea of embodied writing. You know, what if we could take all of this information that we have in our bodies and let it inform our writing? You know, like, if we could invite our whole selves into the room and really create a space that had a lot of permission, a lot of reverence, and was willing to slow down so that we could not skip over what it is we know. You know, that idea was sort of incubating for me. I think for a lot of people, writing is like something you do with your head. It's like up here.
Oh yeah, right.
And this is like yoga and bodywork. Right? Never the twain shall meet. And that you know, my experience was that the more I could amplify the present, the more I could really be in my body, the richer that my writing was, and the less married I was to the stories I had always told. Right? I mean, part of our work is to interrupt the old story. Yeah. It's still, you know, it maybe has been a lovely story, but how do we tell it when we're really showing up? So then I started offering these workshops that help, you know, so basically the structure is we'll do some exercise around the senses, you know, around the breath, around movement, and then we'll do like a 10-minute writing prompt. And so we're developing congruence between what it is we feel and what it is we say. And that is actually, I mean, that is a pretty radical piece for me, because for a lot of us in a lot of categories, that was not encouraged, right? It's not necessarily safe to feel all that we do and then be able to express it. And you know, and this is where I want to mention that there's a lot of research that supports this, that supports the actual health consequences of the suppression, of the tamping down that we had to do earlier on because it wasn't safe. Donna Nakazawa's work, which has been really informative to me, which Sage introduced me to.
I did. I'm like, who's that?
Oh yeah. Do you want me to show you the book? It's like right up here.
Oh sure. Well yeah. Why not? Right? Because we'll link it on the comment list.
Okay.
I said that.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you talked about this book,
Oh,
but,
yeah, cool.
But she is this journalist who kind of has autoimmune disease and was trying to...
It's called The Last Best Cure.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No, that's good. It's like backwards anyways, but thank you,
Oh,
Sarah,
yeah.
for sending me the link so I can figure out how to switch that, but I haven't looked at it yet, so anyways.
So hold up a mirror, and it says, my quest to awaken the healing parts of my brain and get back my body, my joy, and my life.
Nice.
But it's
Awesome.
really about the ACEs study, and probably this has come up in other interviews.
We talked a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Adverse childhood experiences study. Yeah.
This fascinating, huge longitudinal study that was done in the 90s at USC, I think.
Yep.
Asking 10 different questions.
University of California, I think.
University of Southern California?
Southern California. That's what you said. I was like, South
Well,
Carolina? Probably not South Carolina, but you never know.
I just threw out letters.
Yes.
What am I talking about?
Yeah, well, anyways, it was a cool study.
It was a cool study, and what they found was this amazing correlation. They asked people 10 questions
Yeah.
about, abuse and alcoholism and divorce, and then they tracked those people over the next couple decades, and there was such an incredible, shockingly incredible correspondence between whether or not people could say yes and whether or not they had health, and especially autoimmune presentations later on.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think it's worth slowing down there, because that can be triggering information. It doesn't mean that, like, if things were hard, you're destined to get sick.
Thank you for saying that.
At all.
Yep.
But what it can mean is that there's this great opportunity to discharge things later on in life,
Yeah.
and really support your healing in a pretty profound way.
Yes.
And you have talked to dozens of incredible healers who do this,
Yes.
right?
Agreed.
Who help, create spaces. And Sage is a genius at doing this.
Thank you.
Like a profound genius at doing this. So that now as adults we can discharge in a way that's safe, and really that's part of that coming back to presence, to present time, and not carrying this stuff.
Yes.
So, embodied writing can sound like a really simple thing, but part of what it is that here is a safe space where we can express what our bodies contain, and have it be held in a group, and often it's really beautiful. Some people have asked me, like, well, is this training for, like, being a good writer? And I think it's important to clarify, like, this is not a critique group at all.
Yeah.
We are not trying to change.
That's called disembodied writing. No, I shouldn't say that. I'm sure there's critique groups that are deeply embodied and deeply big-hearted. Anyway, sorry, that was stupid.
No. But often when you're in your body, the writing is just a lot more alive.
Yeah.
So it becomes really good writing because it's rich, because you're here.
Yeah.
So it's not training to change you in any way. And I think that's one of the common threads of these modalities. There's nothing about fixing here.
Yeah.
Right? It's really about how we create the container where you can arrive fully and then explore your own process of creation.
That's amazing. Give us a couple of, like, examples of what y'all do in your, like, because, like, can people do some of these at home, like embodied writing? Like, I mean, it sort of seems obvious now. Maybe you do an embodied exercise and then you do a free write, but anything else you want to add that might be helpful to people who've never thought about embodied writing before, or, like, I want to start an embodied writing practice?
Totally.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So, like, maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So just to, like, underline those first two principles again. So the first is total permission, so that we really approach this work with, there's no coercion here. You're really listening for what you want to do. So it's not school, right? It's not where it's like, Sage, you will now write a 4-paragraph, right? It's like, so if the prompt is winter and you're not feeling that, then don't do it, right? So real permission to show up fully.
Nice.
And then the second one is reverence, so that we're listening with reverence. We're listening with a lot of love and appreciation for what the person is sharing. So, there's...
Which is, can I just jump in? Like, there's such a, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, thanks. But, like, reverence, putting, like, reverence and the body together, right, and expression with writing, like, I just think just slowing reverence down, because there's, with trauma especially, it is the opposite of reverence. And so, full permission and reverence, like, they're these words, but I just think, like, they are these energies and intentions that really can make transformation possible.
Thank you.
And to make healing possible. So full permission, which is so hard because of how we've often been conditioned by the educational system, and then reverence as a process to cultivate, right? We start where we start with being able to feel reverence about what we might write, right? It may not feel reverent at first, but it can be an intention.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Sure, I loved it. It was so exciting.
I mean, and I think, it wasn't until you were saying that. So I do these in groups because one of the things that I learned in working with the young people doing radio stories is that a really important part is witness.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, but you can hold reverence for yourself as you're writing. That's probably a lot harder for a lot of us than extending it.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Those are important ingredients.
Great.
So different tools. So one thing we could do is like a breath exercise where we would just, like inhale for 4 and then hold for 7. You're already doing it. And then exhale for 8. Yeah. And then a prompt might be, and we would do that 4 times. And a prompt might be things I know. Things I know. So when you get in yourself, what do you know?
It's like a whole different state.
Yes.
Even with one breath cycle
What comes up for you?
Well, first of all, just like, I have things to say, and there's an ease in my chest, and there's a relaxation that I would much rather talk about the things I know from than trying to make it right or push it out or something.
Yeah.
It's like, the things I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And in that state, right, it can run the gamut. It can be like, I know that I believe in justice and equality. It can also be, I know I like warm milk in my coffee.
Totally.
It's like, it's granular as well as bigger because you're fully here.
Yeah.
Another thing that we do, so I brought in some props.
Yeah, totally.
So I held a workshop the day after November 9th. So we were, the group was pretty wired. And so we did a lot around how do you ground, how do you feel structure? How do you feel that support that is indwelling? And so we used these therapy balls to roll out the fascia in the feet.
Ooh.
Which was really...
Fascia being the...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the sort of sinew that covers and goes within all the muscles in the feet. And when the fascia are opened, it feels a lot more grounded.
Okay. So you put the ball on the floor.
Yeah, and then and this is where being an anatomy nerd really is fun for me because we can talk about, okay, so we're working with the plantar fascia, and then can we go up through the metatarsals? Hopefully not losing people, but
or just your foot,
or just your foot.
As you guys know, that I'm like, so just do what feels good.
Right. So ball to foot. I think we're done.
Both ends.
Yeah, right, both ends. And then a prompt might be ground, and just 10 minutes on ground, and you can take that. You just follow it.
Oh, to write about ground.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that that can mean like, oh, this is my ground. It can be wherever it resonates for you. We also use these. A couple weeks later, we did a whole opening of the sort of cervical spine with self-massage into the longus coli, neck, and the SCM, and then using these to sort of open up the masseter and get into the vagus nerve goes through here, so some nice parasympathetic activation. And then the prompt was, what I really want to say.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So
after we open up this whole area,
Jesus,
what I really want to say. And then, so then I brought a couple other things.
Isn't that so beautiful? That's so amazing.
I mean, it's really fun. It's really fun to think about it.
Yeah.
And then we do sort of a sensory unit. Sometimes we'll do walking meditation for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then, it can be, a prompt could be crossroads. Because I worked in sound for a long time, I love the concept of tape. In radio, we talk about tape and good tape. You'll hear it. Like it's a driveway moment, but it's something you feel in your body. It's tape that you lean into. So one thing we've done is writing to the tape of your life. And that could be, and that's a sound. So it could be like the sound of your bedroom door as a kid that you heard all the time. It could be the way, it could be when your high school boyfriend, girlfriend was like, it's over, and you could still hear the So writing to the tape can be whatever sound is alive for you. And then smell. So I brought in these 2 little jars. Smell is the sense that goes straight to the limbic brain or reptile brain. So, and you can feel free to like get your fingers in there and really
lavender,
and just and then see what comes up for you when you smell that.
It's fun. It's like the same thing as the breathing. It's like it just is relaxing.
Yeah.
And then it's like beautifully purple, and then it just kind of brings me outdoors, and all of a sudden I'm sort of on this journey. And
is it a specific place?
No, it's just spacious, and there's mountains, and
perfect.
It's like nobody's there.
No, that sounds spacious, right? Sage goes alone. It's great. So yeah, and here's this one. This is like, you can get your fingers. You might have to crush it up a little bit.
Rosemary?
It's actually.
No, oh my God, it's pine.
It's pine.
That's
so
amazing.
Where does pine take you?
Well, pine totally brings me to New Hampshire so quickly.
Yeah.
And Christmas, of course.
Yeah.
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 So there's like twinkly lights and warmth and coziness. But I imagine like this could, I mean, smell is so intense, right? Like for great memories, but also for not so great memories.
That's right.
Right. So is that part of what happens for people?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of where, some people have feelings come up.
Oh my goodness, I bet.
And good.
What a cool prompt. Like what an interesting stimulus to use.
Right. So sometimes the prompt will be an actual word, and sometimes it would be much less directive.
Yeah.
And that limbic brain, that's right. We want smell to be able to be like, there's smoke, like leave, right? We don't want it to go to executive function and be like, well, should we leave? Let's have a committee, right?
Right.
So it has this really powerful movement to memory.
And I just think like this is a really interesting just tool for practitioners, right? Like people who are trying to find some new creative ways to help people get stimulated in memory and in things, like even using like sense like this.
Yeah. Totally.
To be able to be prompts for talking places or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we use dryer balls, they're like little, and like roll out hands and talk about touch and things that we love to touch. That takes me right back to my beloved dog who passed away. So and my daughter's cheek, and so there's a real way to get into the body from different places. But again, it's alive. It's not, it's really present to that expression.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this actually makes me want to like create a bit of a web class with you.
Let's do it.
On like, do a couple of different ones to walk people through some different exercises.
Yeah.
Just because I think it's so valuable. And one of the things I love about these is that even though obviously being in a class you get the witness with the reverence, it's also like, embodied writing classes aren't totally like accessible to everybody for a number of reasons. So,
Right. Yeah.
These are just so many different tools that people can use to deepen and do work and, explore the inner infrastructure, what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah. And that accessibility piece is really important to me. So I'm also thinking about like how to get materials out there so that people could use this as a resource to be able to, practice that congruence between what we feel and what we say on their own. And there's ways to go. The more comfortable you get, there's ways, you can do floor exercises where you're actually just, there's one, when the group has, when we work as a group, we're building trust over time. So, as they go, they can have a little more spaciousness to them. When you can, if you can locate a part of your body that feels really, open and a part that feels tight, and see what they have to say to each other.
That's so
like
nice.
sort of allow that conversation to take place, but you really want to slow down for that. Really not skip over what parts of your body are talking.
Yeah, beautiful. That's another really great exercise. I'm sure you have like a pile of them.
I have a pile of them.
Yeah, I think it'd be great for you to write like a book.
Yeah, that's what I like to do.
Okay, good. I bet you people will be ready to read it.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully I just can do it.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, cool, absolutely. In all of the classes that you've done and the work you're doing with people, even in your practice and stuff, what's one thing we're not talking about enough? that you think, and not to divert, like not to change the subject from embodied writing, because I want to come back to that because that was so full. But it does bring up that next question as somebody who works with a lot of different people, bodies, and healing experiences. Like, what's one thing you wish that we were talking about more?
Yeah. Well, just one thing?
Well, we got a couple more minutes. I got some time afterwards.
All right. I mean, one part of my learning that's been really key is around the social nervous system. Like how it is we resource ourselves through connection. So many people that I work with and talk to experience isolation. And are trying to do it on their own. I think, there's a complicated relationship to social media where it's connection, but it's disembodied connection, and it's presentation and performance. So it can be really alienating.
You just said that really well. It can be presentation and performance, social media as disembodied connection. Yeah. You just named some things I think that I don't think are sort of in our consciousness yet. So thanks for bringing those up.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, and I see that in the people that I work with, where it's like it's not a complete connection. So they're not fed in a way that they would be if they felt that resource, that resourcing of being with other people. So I mean, I'm interested in how real in-person networks are created that that allow us to feel supported. And that are really inclusive networks too. That are. I mean, we just talked about the accessibility piece, but I think especially during this time when a lot of us do feel pretty spun out, and we can feel that everywhere. Like, what do we then do together and alone to build that?
Beautiful. Yeah. So talking more about that real embodied opportunity for connection and building those circles and networks. Yeah. In addition to the social media, XYZ, but...
Yeah, I think that can have a useful role. Yeah. But I see, I feel that yearning in so many people for like, I just want to feel like people see me. I want that witness. Yeah. I want to know that I have support.
Absolutely. And, in the workshop that we ran this weekend called Creating Safer Spaces, we talked a bunch about one of the things that's so important about real connection, real bodies in the same room connection, is that we're in the social nervous system, is that we help co-regulate each other, right? And so like my nervous system is always talking to your nervous system, and we have the opportunity, of course, to stimulate in not such a helpful way, but with some degree of safety and presence, that there's so much opportunity to like have all of that activation and triggering come down pretty quickly with each other. Even if we're still overwhelmed, we're not alone, and we have another nervous system, so I don't have to work so hard. Right. And the power of that sort of co-regulation is pretty potent.
That's beautifully said. Yeah. And to keep on with that inclusivity piece that I feel like we need to talk about more is like, how is this work really available? Like, how is it really available, not just for, the demographic of middle class folks, but how is it out there? How is it listening? How is it willing to transform? Because, just to loop back around, sometimes people are like, oh, you went from radio to bodywork to embodied writing, like, what's the connection there? And for me, listening is the most fundamental part of the practice. And that is not facile. Listening is not like, oh, how nice. I think real listening is really embodied, and it is a willingness to transform. It is a willingness to be changed by what it is we hear. And so it's a different kind of intimacy. And
is a willingness to be changed by what we hear. It's a quality of presence that's in your body. That's
right, and that's not static.
And that's just such a fundamental piece for today, for this moment.
Huge. And so if we're really listening to what's happening in this moment, geopolitically, how are we changing? How are we willing to be transformed so that we can, work for justice and social equity and peace? And I get really, I feel myself immediately being like, what then do we do?
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, listening is a good entry point.
Mm-hmm. Well, it kind of goes back to the metaphor of like, what then do we do? But it's like there's at least a little light on the ground in front of you, usually, right, in that flashlight sort of sense of like, we can't see the next 10 things, but maybe we see the next one thing.
Yeah.
And maybe that's to call, our sisters or brothers and have a connect because we haven't spoken to them in 3 months because they voted for Trump, or like whatever, like just like what's that next thing that's going to do something a little different. It's going to bring us back into connection. It's going to make me feel a little bit more whole in this moment of what feels so not whole,
right?
And so maybe the next thing is to the best of our ability to follow that next thing.
Follow the flashlight.
Yeah, and then and I think collectively then to join together and do that together.
Right,
in social movement work and in organizations and in communities, right?
Exactly.
Social nervous system, right?
Yeah.
And be open to, and to be open to what we maybe haven't been able to see before.
Yeah.
Right? Because when we do transformative work, like part of how we know we do transformative work is that something new happens that maybe we've never seen before.
Yeah.
That's in my opinion.
Yeah, that's completely right.
Yeah. So both individually and collectively.
Yeah.
And
because if we're running the old program, we're getting the old program, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is something that I want to talk more about.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. So just checking in on time. We're just about. I know it's amazing.
Time flies.
Time
hanging with Sage.
Hanging with
Facebook.
Totally. How do people find you? How do people access your work and embodied writing and all of that?
Thanks.
Yeah.
My website is roottherapymaine.com, Maine like the state. And there's a newsletter link on the homepage, I think.
Oh, yeah, it's a great newsletter.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It doesn't go out that much, so it won't bombard you. But I send out notices about embodied writing. There's also a contact form if you want to email me, if you want to have a conversation, if you want to hear about embodied writing workshops before the newsletter.
Do you do distance? Do you do Skype sessions with people on embodied writing?
I haven't yet, but I would think about it.
Yeah.
But I have to think about how do you teach embodied writing in a disembodied way, and maybe it's kind of what you're saying, maybe the accessibility piece and building the container that we hold on our own can really carry that through. But if there was interest, I would totally.
You'd be open to the possibility of it.
Yeah, I'm excited to share it. For me, it's been an incredibly alchemical, catalyzing piece. To sort of allow myself to feel really included in my own life, and then I can do work that feels important.
So awesome.
We got a lot of work to do.
We got a lot of work to do, and we need some new tools to do it.
Yeah.
And I think embodied anything is part of the solution, and something that you can do both in a group and on your own, and with really simple exercises that are so profound is part of where it's at.
Yeah. And then we carry them out in the world.
That's right.
Because then we're more present, and then we can respond and make different choices.
Absolutely. With everybody, right? We could talk for a couple more hours. So I just want to thank you for all the wisdom and the medicine that you brought today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My total pleasure and honor to be with you, Sage.
Thanks, Jones. Likewise. Absolutely. What a treat. Anything you want to leave people with, or does it feel complete?
Thank you.
Nice.
Thanks. Yeah, deep gratitude. Sometimes I talk about with my clients, sometimes, it feels like it's this incremental piece of angle of difference, but then when you follow it out, it's really a radical change. And it feels like these videos that you've been doing are like that first opening, and when we follow that out, there is real possibility for profound change.
That's awesome. Well said. It's awesome. So y'all, thanks to Jones, thanks to Portland, Maine for doing some phenomenal interviews. Tomorrow, just check on the Facebook page. It's a little unclear if I'll be down in Connecticut tomorrow night, or if the weather's not going to be good, I might do one more interview here and rustle somebody else up who wants to talk on Hive Live. So stay tuned for that. Love you guys so much. Thanks for watching Hive Live. I'm going to be putting out a survey soon. Just to see what you liked about it, if you'd like Hive Live to continue, what you'd like to hear more about, things like that. So I'll be sending that out soon. So peace out.
Bye.
Love you. Stay sane, stay strong. Take care.